Every neighborhood has that one driver. The one who treats a residential street like a racetrack. For me, it was the guy who flew past children, blew through stop signs, and nearly hit my car, not once but twice. Couldn't make him slow down. The police couldn't seem to make him slow down. So I noticed something else about him. He had the most beautiful lawn on the entire street. And that's when I realized I knew exactly where to plant my revenge. If you've ever lived next to someone who thinks the rules simply don't apply to them, you already know how frustrating that feeling can be. So hit that like button, subscribe, and settle in, because this is one of those stories where the revenge is quiet, patient, and absolutely delicious. There was nothing particularly unusual about my neighborhood. It was the kind of place where people walked their dogs in the morning, kids played outside, neighbors waved when they drove past, and people generally expected everyone to follow the same basic rules. You know, stop at stop signs. Drive at a reasonable speed. Don't turn a residential street into a racetrack. Pretty simple. Except for one guy. I'll call him Mr. Speedy. I don't know if he genuinely believed he was a Formula One driver, or if he simply didn't care about anyone else. But every time his car came down the street, you could hear it before you saw it. And then, whoosh, there he'd go, flying down the road. The problem wasn't just that he was speeding. There were children everywhere. Kids played on sidewalks. They ran between houses. Sometimes they chased a ball into the street without thinking. That's what kids do. And every time I saw Mr. Speedy's car approaching, I felt that little knot tighten in my stomach. I started watching the road more carefully. I'd see a child near the sidewalk and immediately think, please don't let that car come around the corner. Because it wasn't just theoretical. I'd personally seen him nearly cause an accident. Twice that year, he blew through the stop sign and nearly hit my car. Not barely rolling through. Not slowing down and forgetting to stop. He just went. One time, I remember sitting there thinking, did that seriously just happen? I looked in the rearview mirror as his car disappeared down the street. My hands were tight around the steering wheel. My heart was pounding. And the most frustrating part? What could I actually do? So I tried the reasonable options. I attempted to get a speed survey. I looked into having a speed bump installed. But apparently, getting something like that approved wasn't as simple as putting up a sign. We needed 75% neighborhood approval, and the neighborhood would have to fund it. That wasn't exactly something I could accomplish overnight. I also contacted the police. They promised increased patrols. And technically, they weren't lying. Because eventually I saw a police cruiser. At about 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm not sure who they expected to catch speeding through the neighborhood at 6 in the morning. The milkman? So nothing really changed. Mr. Speedy kept driving. And I kept worrying. Then one afternoon in April, something happened that changed the entire story. I was walking my dog. Same neighborhood. Same route. Same routine. My dog was happily sniffing everything in sight while I walked along, enjoying the fresh air. And then I saw him, Mr. Speedy. His car came flying down the road. I watched him approach the stop sign. For a split second, I thought, surely he'll stop this time. He didn't. He blew straight through it. Again. Then he turned into his driveway and pulled directly into his garage. I stood there with the leash in my hand. My dog looked up at me. I looked at the garage. And then, I noticed his lawn. And I mean lawn. It was beautiful. Perfectly maintained grass. No weeds.
No bare spots.
No messy patches. It looked like someone had taken a ruler to every blade. The kind of lawn that probably took hours of work every weekend. I remember thinking, you have got to be kidding me. This guy couldn't be bothered to stop at a stop sign. But apparently he had enough patience to obsess over his grass. And that's when an idea quietly appeared in my head. Not an explosion. Not vandalism. Not something dangerous. Just
mint.
You see, mint has a reputation for being extremely aggressive. It grows quickly. It spreads. And once it gets established, getting rid of it can be an absolute nightmare. That evening I thought about it. Then I thought about the stop sign. Then I thought about the children. And eventually I thought, well, maybe his lawn could use a little variety. From that point on, my normal dog walking routine acquired one tiny addition. I kept peppermint seeds with my dog walking supplies. Twice a day, I walked past his house. And as I passed the lawn, I casually scattered a few. Nothing dramatic. No grand gesture.
No confrontation.
Just tiny seeds disappearing into perfectly maintained grass. Then I kept walking. My dog didn't know. My neighbors didn't know. And Mr. Speedy certainly didn't know. That was the best part. There was no argument. No shouting match. No angry note. Just time. Weeks passed. At first, nothing happened. The lawn remained perfect. I almost wondered whether the whole idea had been pointless. But I kept walking. Morning. Evening. Same route. Same house. Same little handful of seeds. Then one day, I noticed something. A tiny green plant. Right there in the grass. I slowed down. I looked at it. And smiled. It was small. Almost invisible. But it was there. I kept walking. A few days later, there were more. Then more. And eventually, the lawn started changing. The perfectly uniform carpet of grass wasn't so perfect anymore. Little green plants began appearing throughout it. At first, they were scattered. Then they multiplied. And that's when the real beauty of slow revenge began. Mr. Speedy noticed. Of course he did. This was his lawn. His pride and joy. He started treating it. Mowing. Spraying. Trying to get rid of the unwanted plants. But apparently he wasn't pulling everything out by the roots. And that matters. Because mint doesn't exactly ask permission before spreading. Once it gets established, it can keep coming back. So Mr. Speedy would mow. And I'd walk past later. And there they'd be again. He'd spray. And eventually, there would be more. His once perfect lawn slowly became a battle. And I watched it happen one tiny plant at a time. There was something strangely satisfying about seeing him outside, working on that lawn. The same man who couldn't spare a second to stop for a stop sign now seemed to have plenty of time to fight his grass. And I never said a word. I didn't need to. Every time I passed, I simply walked my dog. Exactly like I always had. The difference was that now I knew something he didn't. He was fighting a war. And he didn't even know who had started it. Summer arrived. And by then, the transformation was obvious. His lawn had gone from pristine to, well, minty. Little plants were everywhere. He was still mowing. Still spraying. Still trying to maintain that perfect appearance. But the grass wasn't winning anymore. The mint was. And I have to admit, every time I passed that house, I had to fight the urge to laugh. Because this wasn't some dramatic revenge where someone gets fired or loses thousands of dollars. It was much smaller, much quieter. But psychologically, it was perfect. Because the thing that bothered him most was the thing he'd cared about most. His beautiful lawn. And I knew exactly how it had happened. I also knew why I'd done it. Not because I hated him. Not because I wanted to destroy his life. I wanted him to experience, in a tiny way, what it felt like when something you cared about was affected by someone who simply didn't care about the consequences. Because that's what his driving felt like to the rest of us. He had the power to make everyone else nervous. He had the power to turn a peaceful street into a dangerous place. And every time he ignored that stop sign, everyone else had to live with the risk. There was no satisfying confrontation.
No epáleggi.
No dramatic moment where he suddenly became a better person. So instead, his lawn became my tiny reminder that actions have consequences. And the funniest part? He may still have no idea what happened. Maybe he thinks the mint somehow appeared naturally. Maybe he blames birds. Maybe he blames the weather. Maybe he's still standing there every weekend wondering why his perfect grass keeps getting invaded. But I know. And honestly, that's enough. By the end of summer, his lawn had changed dramatically. The once perfect grass was now dotted with little plants everywhere. He had been mowing. He had been spraying. He had been fighting it. But the problem kept coming back. And every time I walked past, I could see the evidence. I never confronted him. I never knocked on his door. I never told him what I'd done. Because there was something almost poetic about it. The guy who treated our neighborhood like his personal racetrack had discovered that some things don't stop just because you want them to. and while I didn't get my speed bump, and the police patrol didn't exactly solve the problem, I did get something else. A little satisfaction. The kind that comes from knowing that someone who had spent months making everyone else feel powerless was finally dealing with a problem he couldn't simply speed away from. Was planting mint the perfect solution? Probably not. The real solution would have been getting the neighborhood together and finding a way to make the street safer. But sometimes karma doesn't arrive with flashing lights. Sometimes it arrives as one tiny green plant at a time. And now I want to hear from you. What would you have done if someone repeatedly drove dangerously through your neighborhood? Would you confront them, report them, organize the neighbors, or would you let karma handle it? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story gave you that satisfying little feeling of justice, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more Reddit revenge stories. Because sometimes, the quietest revenge leaves the biggest mark.